Hello everyone, if you're new here, welcome. If you're not new, welcome back to Fatma's Archives. So in today's video, I'm going to be reviewing every book I read in January. Honestly, I had a really good start to the year in terms of reading. I read over 5 books, but half of them I started in December, but that's okay. This is going to be a spoiler-free wrap-up, so don't worry, no spoilers for any of these books. And as always, everything here is just my opinion. If you love the book that I didn't like, I love that for you. And maybe discuss with me in the comments, but you get the deal. The first book that I finished in January was Girl Dinner by Olivie Blake. This is a literary fiction with a touch of horror, which if you saw the cover, you probably already guessed. I mean, the Bloody Fork is doing a lot of work here. And I don't want to get into what kind of horror this is because I feel like it's a spoiler. You can go check for yourself before reading the book. I'm not going to say anything. So this was my first ever book by Olivie Blake, and honestly, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Before I get into my thoughts, a very quick rundown of what the book is about. The story follows 2 main perspectives, 2 women. The first is Sloane, a sociology professor who is returning to work after a very long maternity leave. She's trying to figure out who she is, both as a person and as a professor within academia. The second woman is Nina, a college student who becomes obsessed and fixated on joining an elite sorority called the House. And she's convinced that if she joins this sorority, it will give her structure, validation, and a clear path forward after her graduation. So both of these women get close to the house, and it becomes clear that this space has expectations and rituals that are much darker than what I first expected. But I'm not gonna get into it to not spoil the book. So the main thing you need to know before picking this book up is that it's not plot driven. This is very much a character focused book. We spend a lot of time in the characters' heads, following their thoughts, their insecurities, and the way they justify their choices. It's basically a study of women navigating systems that claim to empower them. In our case here, we're talking about academic spaces. Honestly, between the 2 perspectives, I found Sloane's point of view much more compelling, which surprised me because I'm not a mother and I didn't expect to connect with her as much as I did. But her chapters felt more uncomfortable and interesting in a way. She was struggling with identity, ambition, and feeling out of place in an institution where she's technically succeeded in. She's a professor. So the way she was feeling like an intruder in this university, it was very interesting, especially when she started to study the country wife, like the trad wife influencer thing that was happening on social media. And I loved that part, by the way. I loved how Olivie Blake talked about it in a very nuanced and a clever way. Overall, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars simply because I felt like I was still hungry for more, no pun intended. But I really enjoyed it. I really don't know what was happening to me in January. Everyone was reading those cozy winter reads, and I was just reading horror because the second book that I finished is It by Stephen King. Now, if you know me in real life and if you're one of my friends, you know how much I annoyed you guys with this book, with It, with Pennywise, with the Losers Club and everything. I got so invested in this universe that after finishing the book, I binge watched the movies, and now I'm watching It, Welcome to Derry, the new show on HBO. Let's go back to the book. Should I give you a synopsis? I feel like everyone knows what this book is talking about. Yeah, let's jump to synopsis. It, the Losers Club, Pennywise, all that shenanigan. As I said before, I really enjoyed it. I gave this book like 4 stars. So this book is obviously known for being long and intimidating. My copy, I think, was like 1,200 pages long. So I really thought that was entering like the type of horror with monsters, especially like growing up and seeing Pennywise the clown and stuff. But for a book called It, we don't really see Pennywise that much. The story basically jumps between 2 timelines, the losers as kids and when they first confront this creature, and then 27 years later when they're adults and they're forced to return to Derry after the evil It or the clown Pennywise comes back. And I really loved that structure, the fact of going back and forth between the characters as kids and then as adults really shows how differently fear operates in different stages of life, which is very interesting. And I really loved the Losers Club. Those 7 kids, they're probably the strongest part of the book. I can't fathom how he managed to study 7 different characters and he made them all feel distinct, and their friendship felt so real, especially in the way they rely on each other. And the bond between them is what gives the story this emotional weight. Yeah, because this is a horror. This is a horror story. This is psychological horror, but I feel like it was more of a coming of age story than a horror one. I don't know how to explain it. You need to read the book if you want to understand what I'm talking about. The reason this isn't a 5-star read for me is mostly the length and the pacing of the book, because it was very long. It was very long. And I still feel like that last scene in the sewers, if you read the book, you know. I feel like it was unnecessary and I didn't like it. And I talked with people who tried to explain why he wrote it, but I still, it was very disturbing. I did not like it. Would I recommend it? Honestly, if you're someone who read some of Stephen King books before, because was not my first ever Stephen King. I read The Dead Zone and I read The Shining before reading it. So if you read some of his works before and you know his writing style and you know how he loves to describe and loves to go on and on in description and stuff, I feel like you will like it, and I really encourage you to pick it up. However, if you've never read Stephen King, if you're not familiar with his writing style, with the way he writes his characters and stuff, I don't think that it is a good introduction to him as an author. I would maybe recommend you go check his other works. He has a lot of short stories and a lot of other books in the horror genre. And if you like them, maybe you can pick it later. And that's it. Okay, next. The third book was a classic. It's Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. Now, when people asked me why I was reading this book in the first place in January, I always say that because I wanted to read the book before watching the movie. But that's a lie. I wanted to read the book because I wanted to understand why the fans and the people who read this book were so mad about that movie adaptation, and I wanted to understand why. And after finishing the book, I understand why people are mad. So basically, a very quick synopsis before I start. This is a story that follows the relationship between Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff. Heathcliff is an orphan who is taken by Catherine's family. Her dad brought him home one day. So this bond between Catherine and Heathcliff is very strong, very intense. And as they grow older, it turns into very unhealthy obsession and resentment and control. So I gave this book 3 stars. Listen, I want to start by saying that I understand why this book is considered important. I can see the influence it's had and I respect what it's doing. That said, I didn't really enjoy the reading experience. First point, by the way, about that adaptation and the way the movie is being marketed, this is not a love story in the slightest. This is not a romance. It has romantic elements, but it's not romance. Catherine and Heathcliff, they're not romantic figures. They're selfish, they're cruel to each other, and to be honest, they were both very insufferable as characters and I hated them so much. My biggest issue was the characters. They're all insufferable. I don't think... Okay, maybe I loved Edgar Linton, Catherine's husband. That's the only one I tolerated, but the rest... I hated everyone. I hated everyone in that book. It's not a book that I enjoyed, but I'm glad that I read it. And I think it's worth reading at least once. But honestly, it's not something I personally feel drawn to revisit. The fourth book is The Compound by Aileen Rawle. This is the winner of Goodreads Choice Awards in the sci-fi department. I gave The Compound 2 stars. I didn't like it. A very quick synopsis before I start. So this is a dark satire told through the perspective of the main character, Lily, a woman who signs up for a reality TV show. The show takes place in a luxury house in the middle of the desert where contestants are watched constantly, like They have cameras everywhere and they're being filmed and they're being broadcasted live television for the outside world. This book is described as being like Love Island survival show meeting Lord of the Flies and a mix of dystopian. I want to start by saying that the idea is strong. A reality show where people compete for comfort and survival while the outside world is falling apart. And I say falling apart in quotation because we don't really know what's happening outside. And I feel like the book really wanted to critique consumerism and how performance in reality TV show becomes more important than reality, but the execution didn't work for me. My main issue is that this book reads more like it's repeating the concept rather than developing it. We don't get new things as the chapters pass by, and I binged it. I read it in like 24 hours. The chapters feel very repetitive. So overall, I feel like it had a very sharp premise and strong commentary, but the story itself didn't pull me through in a satisfying way. And I don't understand how it won like Goodreads Choice Awards for sci-fi. I'm still trying to figure that part out. The fifth book is my first ever 5-star of 2026, One's Company by Ashley Hutson. I love this book so much. So One's Company follows the story of Bonnie, this woman. She encountered a very traumatic event and lives with a lot of pain and a lot of grief and isolation. So she finds comfort in a sitcom, a TV show that she really enjoys. Later on in the book, she wins a huge amount of money in a lottery and makes a very weird choice, which is to buy a remote property. And she hires contractors to build the exact same replica of the show's set in real life. She builds things like the exact apartment and surroundings, and then she lives there alone, inhabiting the lives of the characters she's obsessed with. And she's kind of using that world as her way of escaping real life. The premise sounds strange at the surface, someone recreating a sitcom and living inside it, but the book never treats it as a joke. It takes her choice seriously and asks why this kind of escape feels necessary to her. Bonnie is deeply lonely, and the novel shows that over and over again. She isn't written to be likable or relatable. She's insufferable, but she feels very real. Her attachment to routine, repetition, and control makes sense once you understand how uncomfortable she is in the real world. And by the end, I felt like the book knew exactly where it wanted to go. It doesn't try to give you easy answers or a comforting resolution. It was very realistic, and I appreciated that. I felt like I was trusted as a reader, and I had to sit with this discomfort and I had to sit with this character to try to understand her and understand what she was going through. This was an amazing read. I loved it so much. I found this on the Kobo Plus catalog. Every month I say that I'm gonna cancel my Kobo Plus, but they end up recommending amazing books every time. It's like they hear me. I don't know what they're doing. So I really loved this book and I highly recommend you check it out. It was not very long. It was like under 300 pages, but it was so good. I think it's one of my favorite books of all times, and I'm gonna think about it for a very, very long time. And that's everything I read in January. Honestly, I'm really happy with how this month went. It felt like a strong start to the year, even with a couple of misses, but that's okay. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought, especially if you disagree with me, because I really love reading those discussions. Also, tell me what your favorite January read was. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.